Meeting in this kind of a smaller group, it allows you to connect with other people who are doing ICAs sources. When you have questions, concerns, oh my gosh, have you ever seen this happen? Those types of things. So I encourage you to connect, keep with that network. Haji and I have been working on this program for a while to try to help our faculty to have a little bit more support and training and all of those good things for doing ICA. So one of the programs that we rolled out last year is our Global Program Leaders Certificate Program. You can see the first awardee is Dana D'Angelo. And we set this up as a way to try to provide short trainings throughout the year. And so I encourage you to consider it. I know some of you have already been to 1 or 2 sessions. If you're into that kind of thing, we do have little like cards where you can keep track with our fun little stickers. This is my former life as a teacher. But you know, it's just a way for you to do different things. And one of the things that we tried to emphasize when we were putting this together is that it's not just health and safety. Of course, health and safety is important, but there are a lot of other things that are important related to cultural engagement, you know, trying to help our students to become more globally competent. And I actually firmly believe that those things are part of health and safety. I think if you are if you understand the local culture better, if you are engaging with locals and that type of thing, it is going to make you safer. We do ask our program leaders to attend 1 health and safety session each year. So if you have colleagues that you know are doing ICAs that have not done one, we encourage you to do that. Once you complete 5 trainings, you can get the certificate. I did include on this handout here a listing of some of the programs that we will be offering this year. The dates for a lot of them have not been set yet, and we may be adding some other ones in there. But it's some nice content for you, and hopefully it'll be fun too. We like to think of ourselves as being fun people. So for today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about international health, safety, and security considerations for proposals, the support resources available, program leader responsibilities, student behavior standards, incident response, and we do have a few case studies to do at the end. But before we dive into all of that, and I'm sorry that Mark is not here because there he is, Mark Brack, taking a group of students abroad.
He's coming.
He is coming. Okay. Well, everyone can say, "Oh, we saw you. You were in the presentation." So, you know, before we talk about, you know, the health and safety nuts and bolts, you know, one of the things for us to remember is that this is a really important part of the experience for students. And it really makes a huge impact. So I applaud all of you and your willingness to do this. And we know from talking with students that even a 2-week ICA can completely change their perspective on things. So, you know, it's also helping them to get to know different perspectives, getting to meet locals and that type of thing. Learning their discipline from a new perspective. And I think when they're in a different environment, they tend to be more open to those things. So it's all of these great things. Unfortunately, the world is also an unpredictable place. So we have fun things that happen like political instability, natural disaster, hospitalization. Hopefully you will not have to deal with something this traumatic. Most likely this is what you're going to end up perhaps dealing with while you're abroad is robbery. So, you know, those are some of the things that kind of come into play, but I like to start with that because what we're always trying to do is balance the academic value with the risk. And we can't eliminate the risk, but we certainly, you know, want to do our best to try to minimize it. So when you put together your proposal, we revamped the proposal. For some of you who have been doing this for a while, you say, oh, this is a new form. And part of that is just because of our duty of care responsibilities, as Drexel has been pushing more and more to support students and student success, and hopefully you've seen that in the ways that the university has changed over the past few years. It also means that we have more responsibilities for duty of care. That doesn't mean that students are not also responsibility for their own care, but as an institution, we are pushing to provide more and more support. That's part of the reason why my position exists. And it's not a very common position. I mean, there's only about 110 of us in the U.S., so we're pretty lucky that Drexel has put in I'm pretty lucky, I guess, that Drexel has put in the resources, though, I would have just been working study abroad anyway. But with our proposals, we are trying to identify potential risks to travelers, and not in a way that means like, oh, we shouldn't do this, because there are a lot of good reasons for doing things. But we want to know what our potential risks are so that we can look at ways to address those or minimize that risk. We do have a high-risk travel and travel risk review committee for places that we would consider to be high risk. Generally, the way we look at that, if it's a State Department travel advisory of a 3 or higher. And we also cross-reference that with our on-call assessments, and they use a 5-point scale. So if it's a 4 or 5 on on-call, or a 3 or a 4 in the State Department, we will send this to the Travel Risk Review Committee to be sure that we've considered all the details. I just finished doing the report for our reviews for this past year, and we did approve every proposal that came to the table. And some of that is because Haji and I will work proactively and say, yeah, no, that's probably not going to fly. I had a student that wanted to go to Syria to do journalism, and I was like, an undergraduate student with no background, I was like, yeah, no, let's just save you some time. Not going to happen. So that's not essential to your academic experience here. So, but I'm on that paperwork, because that's not going to have those structures in place. There are a whole bunch of resources available to you. This is from our Office of Global Engagement website, and it's just under International Travel Resources. I've put together a whole bunch of different links that are hopefully helpful as you're putting, I know that all of you have put together your proposals, but I also share this with you for your own travel, whether it's for work or personal travel. You can make use of these resources. Some of them are obviously Drexel specific, like export controls, but then also, CDC and a bunch of other American Citizen Services from the U.S. State Department, a lot of resources that are available to you. We do also have this really cool Searchlight portal that you can use to get program specific. Mark, you missed it. You were in the presentation. I'll flip back to it. Yeah, the police part, the conduct part, right. But this is great because you can go in and you can look specifically by your country. So you just go to my Searchlight portal. You have to enter in Drexel's group ID, which I've highlighted here, and I can share the PowerPoint with you. But then it takes you to this really cool map. This is usually how I start my day, is looking at this map over a cup of coffee, where you can see what's going on in the world. So you have different things like, if we have hurricane activity that's going on. This one was actually from last September, which is a high hurricane period, so we see a lot of that activity. But then we also see alerts. And you can pull up your country or whatever country, and it'll give you a full list of all kinds of different things. The other nice thing about that is that when you pull up a particular country, you can go down and you can look at what the alerts have been. So I have set up the system so that for any countries where we have travelers, I will get alerts. That's the second thing I look at in the morning after I look at the map. So I look at those and I will get a series of alerts. But it's also good for you to know what kinds of alerts have been going on in your particular area over the course of the year. So for all of our travelers, we do have on-call global assistance. This is university-provided coverage. It is part of what we do. We would like for you to make extensive use of the assistance services, and not perhaps as much of these, but if you need them, we need them. So assistance services, these are ways that you can prepare, but they do medical, dental, pharmacy referrals. So it's good for you to know that if something happens, if someone loses a prescription while they're abroad or whatever, they can get a pharmacy referral, a doctor referral, whatever. Just recently I was on I get on call for my personal travel as well. My husband cracked a tooth in Bulgaria. So we reached out to them. We got the name of a dentist. He decided to tough it out and get it done here. But we had it. We had it right away, and it was really nice. Another really great tool that On-Call has is a 24-hour nurse helpline. So if you have a student that's sick and you're not quite sure, should I take them to the doctor, whatever, you can call the nurse helpline. Have the student describe their symptoms, and I would encourage you to have the student describe their symptoms, not try to be the go-between. You may have to get them to make the call, but to let them talk directly. And then the nurse can say, hey, it sounds like you need to see a doctor, or no, it sounds like it's just dehydration or whatever, let's give it 24 hours. You can also get pre-trip information and active travel advice. I did that for Frank after an on-call session. He said, hey, I want to see what it says about my program. And so, we can send them the itinerary, and they will do an assessment of things that we should take into consideration. We realized that Pamplona is pretty safe, except for the running of the bulls, I guess. But, and I mean, we already knew that. I would say that typically when we're asking for that travel advice, it's more in a location where we have some concerns. Like I will regularly do it for Haiti. I'll say, hey, give me an update on what's going on in Haiti. The risk analysts at On-Call left me. I call them all the time. So they're like, oh, hi, Marcia. I don't even have to say my last. Marcia's a distinctive name, but I don't even have to say my last name. They're like, oh, hi, Marcia. They also have translator and interpreter assistance and legal consultation and referral. So there's a lot of resources there that you can use should you need them. In addition to our assistance services, we also have for the critical situations, medevac and repatriation, medically advisable repatriation, a visit of a family member. If you have a student that's hospitalized, On-Call will pay for a family member to go over and be with them. If something happens to you and we need to replace you, they will pay for a new group leader to come over. So if there's a political situation and they decide we need to get you out of there, they'll cover that, as well as natural disaster evacuation. So obviously we don't want to make use of these services, but if we need to, we can. And I will say, in the few times that we've used them, I've been really pleased with kind of the consistency of things and the messaging that we're getting. And I do feel like they don't cut corners with things. I mean, we've had a medically assisted evacuation, which is quite expensive, and the patient was insisting that he didn't need it, and they said, no, this is the way we're going to do it. So, so it's a pretty considerable expense to them, and they've done the right thing in those scenarios. So, some good support for you. Two numbers that you should absolutely have with you at all times, and in the little packet, I did include a copy of the downloadable. It's, I think, the very last page or the second to the last page. You can download it onto your phone. The On-Call emergency response line, this is a Drexel dedicated number, so if you call in, they will know that is a Drexel person. Typically, if you are opening up a case, they will also alert me that case is being opened, but you can call them 24/7. They're going to take some general information from you. They, depending upon what the situation is, they may ask for a callback number or something like that. Because obviously when you call in, they might not be able to, give you exactly what you need right then. It might take them a little bit of time, but they're going to get the support going for you. The second number is our Drexel International Emergency Line. This goes directly to my cell phone, or if I am traveling or away, there's a couple other people at the university that have been trained to answer this phone. I will say that the most common call I get on this line is actually parents who haven't heard from their children, and just want to be sure everything's okay. So, and, you know, but I have had calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've had calls, you know, at any given time, so please don't hesitate to reach out. I know on some of our spring break ICAs, I actually had 2 calls in the middle of the night because faculty members had issues that they needed some help with. And I will say, if you're not sure if you should call on call, it's fine. Call me first. We can talk it through. And because there are some things that are maybe just Drexel specific that on-call might not necessarily be able to help you with. So, you know, if it's a medical thing or something like that, yeah, definitely call on-call right away. But if it's, you know, something you're not sure, feel free to run it past me. You know, we may say, yes, we definitely want to engage on-call for this, but in other cases, it may be something that we can handle internally.
Are those numbers that, the last 2 numbers, should we give those numbers to students?
The students also have those numbers, yes. The
Those
students.
numbers are in the PowerPoint template for the pre-departure orientation on the
Okay, they
site.
have that.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
fine.
and absolutely, the students should have those numbers. You know, we've also had funny, we had someone call on call with an international emergency because they were fired from their co-op, from their international co-op. Yeah, so it's funny what students consider to be emergencies sometimes, but the good thing that is that we know that they have those numbers, and on call handled that very well. They, said, well, you should have tried harder. No, no. So anyway, it's we all kind of get a laugh out of this, but it's good to know that the students are aware of the numbers. So just talking a little bit about your responsibilities for the program. Pre-departure orientation, I think some of you have already, for those of you who are going abroad in September, you've already done your pre-departure orientations or they're coming up. I know Haji works very closely with you on providing templates and whatnot. But when you're putting that together, you also want to consider the needs of your particular population, kind of looking at your group of students and understanding if there are some special needs that may be within that group, whether that be related to gender or race or some kind of disability. We have worked through a lot of those issues, and I will say students are getting better about coming to us early on and saying, hey, this is my issue. Do you think I could do an ICA? And, I will say that Haji and I are very like, yes, we're going to find a way to make this happen. So we've definitely kind of leaned towards that, but we also want the student to be aware of what our limitations may be in particular places. And we hope that you can do that as well. Sometimes students may come to you with special requests and those types of things, and you say, my specialty is anthropology. I don't know these particular things. Call us in, pull us in, so that we can help to kind of try and figure that out. We also want you to think a little bit about backup plans for program continuation. If something were to happen to you, if something were to happen in that country, all of those things, and that I'm not trying to be negative and say, oh, bad things are going to happen and that type of thing, but think about, okay, what would I do if someone died in my family 2 days before I was about to leave and I needed to stay here, or something like that. We have now asked all of our faculty to identify somebody else who can take over the program, but just to kind of think about those things a little bit.
Can I add one
yeah.
thing? So all of you would have listed a backup person on your paperwork. Make sure that backup person actually has your program information, like your itinerary and your syllabus and everything that they would need to continue or to run the program if something happens. Because otherwise they're not going to be very backup.
Be sure that you ask them. Yeah.
Make sure they're aware that you put their name down first, and then make sure they have everything they need.
Yeah. Once you get on site, we talk about it as an orientation on site, but it's really kind of reviewing the details once you get on site with students. Students pay attention in a certain way when they're sitting here in Drexel. They may pay more attention when they're actually there and looking around saying like, wow, this feels a little different from what I was expecting. So Remember to review that critical information. We would encourage you to test communications within the first 24 hours. And for those people who are not, if you have a WhatsApp group and you say, I want everybody to respond to me, and you have 3 people that don't respond, you need to talk to those 3 people and say, when I do this, you need to do this, okay? Because we don't know what's gonna happen. Hopefully, it may just be, we're changing restaurants for dinner, but we want to be sure that the students know, and that your communication works. Also, I think it's something that starts in the pre-departure orientation, but kind of continues as establishing a good dynamic in the group. We're all in this together. We're all going to support each other. I think that's what everybody wants, is this lovely group of students that are all working together. But I think that is sometimes a challenge. I mean, that doesn't happen here at Drexel either. Sometimes you have that class where you're like, the dynamic in this class is so weird. So, to really kind of work towards establishing that, reminding students of your shared common goals and that type of thing. And I think, also reminding them things are going to go wrong. Like, it just happens. Even if it's perfectly planned, something will happen. It'll rain on the day that you're supposed to walk somewhere. I mean, it could be something minor, but reminding them like, hey, something's going to go wrong, and your attitude when that happens helps us to resolve it either in a positive way or a negative way, and we want to do it in a positive way. So, just reminding that. And also, you do need to be available 24/7 and present for all program activities. It's not like you send them on their merry way and then you go and you are checking your email or whatever. If it's a program activity, you need to be there. I'm sorry I have to put that in there, but we actually had a group leader who didn't think that was necessary. So now it's in there. So.
Marsha, I have a question. So last night we did our orientation, and one student told me that her mother and sister are going to be staying in Pamplona the same week at another hotel. And she asked about it because Sunday there's some flex time before we have dinner, and she said, well, can I be free at that time? I said, yeah, there will be some free time, but there's not, during the week, there's very, very little. And we have a very, as you can see from the itinerary, she said, oh yeah, that'll be fine. So I don't know if you've ever had any experience with that, or like I don't think it's going to be a problem, but she's, I just want to make sure there's not any kind of interference there.
I think I would follow up with her
Okay.
via email and just state very clearly, what a nice treat that you're.
Yeah.
What a nice treat that your mom and your sister are following you around. I'm sure.
You're a college student,
there is a chance that she's not thrilled about this treat either, and so she's going to go and have one dinner with mom and then say like, get on your way. But I think just to reiterate, our program, it's been designed very carefully, intentionally. This is an academic course, and you are expected to be in all activities, and mom and sister can go do whatever they're going to do, but they're also not welcome in those activities,
Right.
So, she can share like, oh, we did this and it was great. Why don't you do that tomorrow? Because we did that today or something. But, you're not responsible for mom and sister. No.
Right,
So.
I would also mention that she is expected to stay in the accommodations with the group.
Yes.
Like if the family's like, oh, come stay at our hotel or something, that she needs to also be with the group.
She seems very agreeable, so I'm hoping that
Right.
is an indication.
Right. It could be nothing, but I think it's good just to make the expectations clear.
Oh yeah, great. Like the mom.
So last year we first talked about these student behavior standards, and again, you should set the stage for this in your pre-departure. I know that Haji included this in the template that she sent out. But students need to understand that they are subject to Drexel University Code of Conduct, local laws and regulations, even if they don't know what those are. And we recommend a few rules from Education Abroad. I'm going to share with you, actually, and it's in draft form because we're still waiting for General Counsel to finally review it. But we did put together kind of some guidelines, including consequences for students, which may be helpful to you, may not. You may already feel like you have this under control. But if you feel like it would be helpful for you, on the back it kind of gives you a set of consequences that you can kind of follow. And we're certainly not hoping that we need to dismiss a student from a program, but we have had one case where a student's behavior was so outrageous that that student was dismissed from the program. But, really keeping it short and sweet. You need to be on time, prepared, and actively engaged. You need to be respectful of participants and local culture. And I think that also means, showing respectful behavior at all times. We've heard some interesting stories about, couples on trips that may be, engaged in more things than they should be, that they...
Couples that form on trips.
Yes, yes. So to be respectful of everyone. And we do really insist that you do some limits on alcohol consumption while you're there. If it's a program activity, maybe, they can have one drink or something like that. If it's on their own, that's up to them, but I will refer them back to they need to be actively engaged. So if they, in their free time, go out and have several drinks and then the next day are not able to be actively engaged, then they're not really following the rules. So I would also say if you keep them busy, that also helps in that regard. But, we know that in some places it's appropriate. We've had some students that have done wine tastings or beer tastings and that kind of thing, obviously as a cultural experience, and that is part of the culture. So we don't want to say like, no way, you can't have this at all, but to really keep some limits on it so that it doesn't end up being an issue. This probably also goes without saying, but same thing for our faculty and staff. I know that this is stressful, and at the end of the day, you may want to really unwind, but remember that you are also the 24/7 person, so if you don't feel that you can actively fulfill those responsibilities because you're passed out with a lovely bottle of wine by your bed, please don't do that, okay? So just to keep those things in mind.
So I should take that off my phone on the natural response.
Yes.
little emoji.
Yeah.
By the bottle.
So in terms of incident response, if there is some kind of incident, if you have a local contact that can help to support you in that, that is the ideal. I know some of you have partners that you're working with, or you might have a provider that could be that local contact. And then you have your Drexel emergency contacts. You can certainly call me. I will more often than not immediately loop in Haji, also Donnie Ascarelli, who's the director of our office. We kind of work as a team together on these things. And one of the things I will share with you is that I really believe that a team is the best way to do this. It's not, okay, just give that problem to Marcia, because Marcia doesn't know all the details. Marcia hasn't been working closely with you throughout. So, sometimes when we're working through these things and I'll say to Haji, okay, so, what do we know about this faculty member and how much additional support do we need to provide them? Are they good to go, or do you think that they might need some? Because she knows you, more closely. So we do work together as a team to address those things and loop in people accordingly. I will say that if it is something that has the potential of making the news or anything like that, we do loop in President Fry. He does not like to read about things in the paper and say, what's going on? But we're trying to keep communication loops fairly tight with these things. Types of incidents that you might experience: a medical or psychological breakdown of some sort, sexual assault. We have had that happen on programs. A legal emergency, if student is arrested, that has also happened on our programs. Theft is probably the most common, or loss of a passport. That's pretty run of the mill, and those types of things can happen. Natural disaster, political events, we haven't had a lot of those, but there is some potential for that. And I put terrorism up there, but honestly, terrorism has really become this big thing that everybody talks about all the time, and the chances of it happening are so small. I mean, it is something that we have to pay attention to, but that should not be you should not be overly concerned about that unless you're going into an area that has a lot of potential activity. It's more theft and medical that will be the common things that you'll experience.
I realize terrorism is crazily unlikely. However, after the past weekend, we're all freaked out. We'll be in Barcelona at a place where 2 years ago, there was a terrorist attack. Right at that location, because everybody goes to the Ramblas.
Right.
Are there any advices, like, if something happens, you tell kids, everybody hit the ground? Is there anything like that in terms of advice, if something should suddenly erupt?
I mean, I think if something like that does happen, my recommendation would be to get those students, like if they're sitting in an outdoor cafe or whatever, to get them inside to a restaurant, inside to a hotel. Big hotels are some of the best places to shoo students into quickly because hotels tend to have their own security teams in place. I would also say that if you get them into a hotel, to get them up to the second floor rather than being on unless of course the shootings come from upstairs, then don't take them into that hotel. But I think it is kind of, I mean, the sad thing is that our students now are so much more already kind of aware of these things. To be honest, I think in some respects they're in greater danger here in Philadelphia than they will be in places abroad. But their comfort in a different environment is definitely something that's going to trigger something like that. So I would say that, getting them off, if you're outside, getting them into a location, if that's not a possibility, I would say to get them down and to, get tables, get them underneath tables or something along those lines. And I think this is also something where if it's taking place, let's say it's taking place during free time, you want all of those students to come back to whatever the shelter in place area is. Typically that's your hotel or where you're staying, so that you can do a count. Also so that you can check in with those students on mentally how they're feeling. Because some students, this happens in Philly, it doesn't bother me. Other students will really be shaken and they may need some additional support, which we can help with to provide. So these are the kinds of things that you are going to experience that you could experience, I should say. I hope that you don't experience them. In the packet that we put together, we do go through kind of point by point, if it's medical, if it's sexual assault, all of these things, give you some guidelines for what to do. That should be helpful. I would say in all of these cases, please know you are not alone. We are here to support you. We certainly do not expect you to jump in as a therapist or any of those things, unless of course you're trained in that way. But there are support services that we can do. It's basically, you just kind of have part by part how you would address that. But I think also remembering that, we have kind of some general guidelines, but every case is going to be different. We might handle something a little bit differently according to the needs of the student, the location, what kind of support we feel that they need. But I think it's important for us to just kind of keep in mind, like, okay, these things could happen. So in terms of general considerations, if there is some kind of an incident, you want to ensure that the students are safe. Notify Drexel as soon as it is safe to do so. If it's something big that's making national, international news, we may already be reaching out to you. And determine the type of care that is needed so that we can access resources. Some of that may just be calling on call and saying, okay, what do we need to do next? And they can kind of help you through that, but we can also help you through that. I will encourage you to try to be as objective as possible in providing information, even if you are feeling very nervous or whatever, because that's one of the things that can make a situation more challenging, is if the information being shared is sensationalized in some way. We want to be as objective as we can and looking at that so that we can manage it. Keep in mind as well that social media will likely be a factor if there's some kind of an incident, and I would encourage you to talk with the students about this, that it's really not appropriate for them to share other people's maladies or whatever on social media. Imagine if you're a parent and you find out that your child was sexually assaulted on a program through social media. That you don't want to get that information that way. So just, remind them to be respectful of that as much as they might want to capture things. That they should be responsible when using social media. Also, when you're dealing with an incident, you want to have some patience with the local environment and the culture. I think Americans are very let's get on this, we're going to solve this in 24 hours or less. And in other cultures, that might not be their approach. That does not mean that they are not doing anything. It just means that they approach it in a little bit different way. And I think managing expectations from students and parents and even administrators here on how quickly something can be resolved is a big part of what we try to do in these cases. When we've had situations and you feel, the Americans jumping in very quickly, okay, you're going to have this resolved, Marcia, by the end of the day, right? And I said, I'll give you an update by the end of the day, but I'm not going to have it resolved. And we've had some funny circumstances where, in one case that we had with some Japanese colleagues where we were spending a lot of time apologizing about the situation, and someone here at Drexel said, would you stop apologizing? We've apologized. And I'm like, this is very important in Japanese culture that we apologize again and again and again. So we try to kind of move that into whatever our incident response is. Communication, if there's some kind of incident, is key. Typically the way we will set it up is that I will ask for, every 6 hours or something, some kind of an update, or can you give me an update by the end of the day, or let's establish a time so that we're giving information here as well. Obviously, we're here to manage and support. When there's an incident going on, everybody in my office knows, stay away from Marcia's office. She's dealing with that. When the door is shut, don't go in there. So that we can kind of focus on the task at hand. My kids also know that, so mom's not making dinner tonight, there's an incident. So, anyway, we are here to support you, and it's not just during business hours, I guess is the point. Also, as kind of a follow-up to that, we do have an incident report that we ask for people to complete. There's a copy of that form in the little handbook. And obviously that's not the most important thing in that moment, but we do need that for reporting purposes. Also, because we are arranging the housing for ICAs, it is a clearly reportable destination. So we have to provide that information to public safety on any incidents that take place. So, all right, so now, since I've talked and talked and talked, we're going to do some case studies. Okay, we're good on time. So that we can think about real incidents. I'm just going to give, maybe if the three of you can work together on this one.
Where's 4 and 4?
Oh, okay, I can do 4 and 4. Okay, Mark, you want to join this group, and then I'm going to give this other group a different scenario.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I had a very real situation for my own travels,
Oh.
Drexel travel.
Oh,
A few years ago, I was going to a conference and coming
oh,
back.
okay. No, I don't
And
think
all
I've
of a
loaded
sudden
it
we
yet.
had this Iceland eruption
Okay.
volcano thing.
Oh,
Okay.
And
No, I
we
haven't
just-
loaded that.
hospital based, like,
Mhm.
so I didn't even contact anyone. I found, fortunately, one of my friends was living
In Germany,
Munich.
so.
So we were at the same conference, so I kind of stayed for a week there. But I can't imagine what I would do if I were with a group of students. So what would be kind of your reaction
We
to
would
this?
call on call and see if they could make alternative arrangements for
In that
you.
case, it was impossible for a week. Nothing was flying out, basically.
So in that particular thing, I think I would talk to on call about some hotel support for that group because that would be a natural disaster situation. So and that's basically what we would do. The other thing that we have looked at times, I mean, when you go on an ICA, you set aside this time, but you have a lot of other responsibilities, and so if you need to stay longer because of something like that, or hospitalization, or whatever, that's also a scenario where we would check with you and say, hey, are you okay to stay with the student, or, what, does someone need to relieve you? And, I mean, in that scenario, it would be really tricky. I don't know, I mean, I guess you would fly into Paris and take a train over or something, but we do also have that.
To the U.S. that was canceled. Like anything flying back to the U.S. was
From
transferred.
anywhere?
Yes, anywhere. Like it was everywhere. There were no outgoing flights
Oh,
because of the East
Yeah.
Coast.
Yeah.
There was nothing was flying out. The first one was after a week that they were scheduling.
okay. So, I mean, I think we would look for some support for you. The other thing that I would probably consider in that scenario would be if we have contacts, university contacts, that may be able to provide you with just a little bit of a break. As well, could we, could one of our partners from one of the German universities have someone that could hang out with the students for a while or whatever, so you could, I don't know, go and just, mentally regroup yourself and those types of things. I mean, obviously, in certain situations, we may not be able to do that, but we're also trying to think through what kind of support we can have. And we're pretty lucky that we do have a great network of partners all across the world, and that we can try to get some support available. So I've given two different scenarios, so if you can maybe all sit together and take a look at your scenario and think a little bit about how you would deal with this situation.
I think you'd call Marcia as the answer. We can.
No, you can always, yes, you can
I mean,
always
that's
call
always the
Marcia.
answer,
Yeah,
but we're to do
call
more than
Marcia.
that.
Just call Marcia, she'll help you.
Oh, Marcia.
Call Marcia, yeah.
Problems
About these scenarios. And I did purposefully kind of try to choose scenarios that I thought were likely to happen to you. So this will happen for sure. You receive repeated emails from Jane's mother. Jane has not contacted her mother since the program began. She's worried about her. You've asked Jane multiple times to get in touch with her parents and have shared her mother's concern with her, but Jane has yet to take any action. Jane appears happy and is doing well in the course, so you don't believe there is any cause for alarm. What should you do next?
Family counseling?
I will let this group share kind of what their thoughts were with it.
Wasn't that ours, Lark, last year? Wasn't that ours? We had one of those last year.
Yeah. We have one every term, so.
Not in our group, the Berlin group, but,
It was in the Japan group.
okay. Well, I brought up the fact is that there's certain privacy laws, so there's certain things you can't do. But if you wrote back to Jane's mother saying, I've asked Jane to call you, she appears to be happy and there doesn't be any cause for alarm, that seems to be not revealing any privacy issues, right? And just say, I've asked her to do it, but she seems to be fine.
Right.
I was thinking, nip the whole thing in the bud and tell the students the first day that we get there, when everybody's checked in, hey, guess what, I gotta call my wife, or I'm
Right.
gonna be in trouble.
Right.
Call or text mom or dad or whoever right now, get it out of the way, say I'm here, I'm good, and start there.
Right. Yes, I agree with both of those ways of addressing it. I think you're right, Mark, that there are FERPA laws and you have to be careful about what you share, but you can say things like, I have relayed the message to the student. We can say things generically like all students have arrived and are successfully participating in the program, which doesn't specifically identify that student. We don't know what Jane's situation is. Jane could be so happy to be away from her mother. She could be estranged from her mother. There could be all kinds of different things that are going on there. But I think, more often than not, it's just a parent that wasn't expecting not to be connected to their kid. And so another recommendation that I would make to you is to remind your students to tell people, I am going to be so busy, it's a different time zone, all these other things. If you don't hear from me, that doesn't mean anything. That maybe I'm just going to do a check-in when I get there and that's it. And you won't hear from me for the rest of the week. You can look at my Instagram, you can look at, nobody uses Facebook anymore, but, whatever they're doing
No
to
kids
post.
can say that to their parents.
So, well, I mean, it's interesting because we have used that before when we've been trying to determine if a student
My
is
kids won't.
okay. We'll look, we'll say, are they posting on Instagram? Because if they're posting on Instagram, that means that they're okay. So, I think that it's really preparing those here here who may be overly concerned if they don't hear from their kid all the time, for that to happen, and to reassure them that this is normal, this is likely to happen. I know for myself, when I travel internationally, I don't really communicate all that much with my husband and my kids because it's a different time zone and we're running around doing different things, and frankly, I want to be focused on what I'm doing there. It's a nice little escape for me. But I think that with this generation of kids, they do communicate very frequently with their parents, maybe every day, in fact. So that's something that we kind of want to try to preempt as much as we can.
The other thing about that is that all of the students in the study abroad system have indicated whether they've waived FERPA, and 99% of them do. You can see that in your portal if you go into student application, but if you're not able to access that on your phone or whatever, you can always just reach out to us and we can check.
Yeah,
if
to
they've
see.
waived their FERPA, but most of them do.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to this one because this wasn't one that was discussed, but it's also a challenge for people. It's because sick happens. A student on your program has been quite ill for several days, has been unable to attend class, your program's activities, you prod her to go to the doctor, but she refuses to go, saying she does not want to pay for it, sees no reason to go since they won't be able to do anything for her. What do you do? All right, so this was your scenario. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I've done a fair bit of traveling with my kids, and it's one of their friends overseas where something always has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so my instincts, which are admittedly parental, is if my assessment of this young lady is that she's really sick and it doesn't feel to me right, I'm taking her to a doctor and I'll pay for it myself. You've got to get medical attention, and if it turns out to be nothing, then it's nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one way of approaching it. Any other thoughts on how to try to encourage this girl to get to the doctor?
Like, very simply, I would physically knock her door because we're in the same hotel.
Yes.
So physically assess the person, how they look like, and then I'm not a doctor, so first thing I would do, I would call I would offer to talk to the nurse. This line, so that she talks to the nurse or he talks to the nurse, that's she. And then from there, that professional will tell them what to do. So it will not be me telling them what to do with the professional.
Yeah.
That's kind of my first thing.
Yeah.
And if needed, since we're in the same hotel, I would just physically, I would not do this, she texted me and that's it.
Right, right. And I think that's an excellent suggestion, is making use of that nurse. Because she is a registered nurse, she's a medical professional, and sometimes students will take their guidance over someone, over a concerned faculty member, unless of course you happen to also be a medical doctor. So I think the other thing too, to remind the student in this scenario is to, another approach to it is to remind them that they're missing the content of the course, and they've come all this way to do this, and you've put together this amazing itinerary for them, and they're kind of missing out on a lot of the content. If the student is concerned about going by themselves, so to try to get out what is the real concern there, maybe the student is concerned about going to the doctor by themselves. To accompany them to the doctor, or to see if there's a friend that could go with them, that type of thing. So, there are different ways to kind of support this, but I think that if she's so down for the count that she really can't participate, then it's something that you have to address.
So just one question we raised was, she's been quite ill for several days. So I was wondering about like day one. She's ill and she's out of the program for day one, what do we do then as opposed to after
So if
days?
something like it's from the get-go?
Yeah, because my sense is, well, let's say it's day 2 or whatever. It's
Right,
not the
right.
first
She
day,
had one
but-
bad day,
but
and
yeah,
the next
she's
day
out for
she
the
gets
whole
up
day.
and she's not feeling well.
Yeah,
still.
I mean, even the first day, if she's out for the whole day, I'm more inclined to contact, I'm inclined to contact on-call.
Yes,
right there.
yeah.
Like, why wait, right?
I would do
Definitely
that.
not
Okay.
waiting several days.
Yeah, it's definitely,
Yeah.
I think
You
it's,
only have 7 days.
Yeah,
in
right,
some
right.
Right.
cases,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it's not something that you
Okay,
necessarily
all right.
want to wait on. So I think that that's also a
Okay,
good
yeah.
recommendation, is that, kind of looking at this, if you shouldn't let these things go, especially because you just have such a short amount of time. But, if a student is in a situation where they really can't participate, the best thing for them is to come home. And the best thing for your program is for them to come home.
Yeah.
So,
We were discussing this aspect by, you were suggesting giving them extra, online
In-room
assignments, so
assignments,
what
yeah.
would be
Online.
would you like to tell, so we
Yeah, I
can
think
kind of
that's
get
a good
advice
idea.
whether this is an appropriate solution?
Yeah, so I was thinking about in terms of like, let's say while we're out during the day, we could be WhatsApping, so we could see her, talk with her, see her in her room since she's ill. So she wouldn't be out at the park, right?
right.
But then also offering some more like online assignments, so she could do it from her computer, reading about, well, this is Singapore, so reading about Singapore, doing something else. Because like I was saying, this is academic, so she's missing out on what you said, And then also, I'm hearing, just in terms of students, right? Hey, I got up, I got dressed, I got out. She gets to lay there, nothing's expected of her.
Right, right.
But that's an issue, which of course students are going to raise, so I thought about that too. And then we live in a very litigious society, so I'm hearing about FERPA on your side. and I'm hearing about CYA on our side. Oh, you know, so I think both of those things sort of are
Right.
important too.
Right. And I will say, I mean, I think that you're right, that kind of giving that student some other kinds of assignments and, you know, making it clear that you still have academic expectations that you have to follow through on is important. But I think the other thing that we also try to do when we're managing these different cases is to be sure that we're taking care of the needs of the students, and the academic piece, we can figure that out later, you know. So sometimes the student just needs a quick, swift, you know, oh my God, this is going to affect my academics. All of a sudden I'm feeling better than I thought I was, you know, or whatever. But at the same time, if it's a serious incident, we don't want to exacerbate the situation by adding stress about academics. So it's a very fine line with that, and you kind of have to see what you know about the student. Sometimes in cases like this, when we have a student, I'll go back and I'll read their essay on why they wanted to study abroad. I'll ask the advisors to go in and look at AVT notes, anything that is kind of giving me some insight into the kind of person that student is, so that whatever approach we're using is going to support the best interests of the student. If it's a super high achieving student who you know, has always had very high grades and seems to be very tightly wound and is having these issues and isn't responding to kind of an academic push, then I would probably pull off. But, you know, that's a lot of information for us to gather. We can certainly gather that information for you while you're on an ICA. Because remember, while you're, you know, trying to deal with this, you've also got a whole bunch of other students, and you've got a program to run and this amazing itinerary that you've put together. So, you know, you can also ask us to do some of that legwork. Say like, hey, I'm having some issues with, you know, Haji. She's still laying around in her bed. Marcia, can you look into this and see what you can find? And then I, you know, can put together a little bit more information that may help you to address the situation.
Can I complicate this story with a real thing that happened to my family?
Sure.
That
Real stories are the best.
That will make this very complicated. The kid gets to a doctor. The kid has an ear infection. Doctor says, you're supposed to fly somewhere tomorrow? Not happening. You cannot be on a plane. It's going to make it 20 times worse. Meanwhile, it could be internal travel. I mean, we do have an internal air flight set up on our trip. Or it could be going home.
Right.
What do you think then?
Well, what did you do?
Well, we were supposed to fly from the Barrier Reef to New Zealand, and we canceled that part of the trip. We rearranged our air tickets so that we could stay where we were for another day or two while my daughter recovered. And by the way, there was a teenager with us who managed to cut herself and need stitching and rock. I mean, it was,
You've been well prepared for this role.
and then we just rearranged our trip to New Zealand. But that's a family. We could do that as a family.
Sure.
What do you do?
Sure. So in this scenario, you can't leave the student there. You can't say, oh, you can't travel. I'm going to leave you here. The group is going to go on. You catch up with us once you can. So in these scenarios, it's tricky. If you have two group leaders, this is where your group splits up. Unfortunately, if you don't have two group leaders, this is where you're trying to pull in your local contact and say, hey, can you be with this student until either someone from Drexel can get there, or you know, the student is able to fly, or a parent can get there, or some kind of scenario like that. Remember that if a student is hospitalized for 24 hours, we can send their parents over. On-call will pay for that. And typically, you know, depending upon what the diagnosis is of the student in the hospital, on-call, if it's something serious, on-call will just start making the arrangements right away, even though it hasn't been 24 hours. They're not waiting. It's just the parent can't leave until 24 hours, you know, after, but it takes a while to do that. Another thing that you might remind your students about is that if their parents do not have a passport, and we have a student that's hospitalized and we want to send the parent over, you're talking about another 24 hours before we can get that parent on a plane. So, you know, these are kind of some things that Students don't always think, of course, maybe they don't want their parent to come over, but you know, it is a proactive thing for them to be sure, like say, hey, I hope that someone in your family has a passport, you know, just in case. It's kind of something that you always are thinking about.
I'm just doing a 7-day program,
Mm-hmm.
and students are told they can go early,
Mm-hmm.
they can come late, they can stay late if
Mhm.
they want. In a situation like that, obviously, if the student's in the hospital, I'm not going anywhere, I can
Mhm.
stay there. But if they are planning on staying on anyway, apart from the program,
Right.
how does that affect the situation?
If they're ill,
Yes.
but they're not hospitalized.
Well, if they're hospitalized, I'm gonna stay anyway,
Right.
of course, but, yeah, I mean, if.
I mean, I think if at the end of the program they are choosing they have selected to stay on. I mean, I think it depends upon the scenario, and this is where I would encourage you to loop us in and help us, allow us to help you with messaging to that student. If a student is really not doing well, I mean, we can't necessarily control what they do here at Drexel in the same way we can't necessarily control what they do abroad, but we can put very clear guidance in place, like we recommend that you return home, you have free will. We would probably work a little bit with general counsel on what kind of language we would use. With that, Nicole Sugarman has worked with us on a lot of our international cases, and she's really good at allowing us to kind of take a firm stand on things, but she helps us with the language. Sometimes our stand is a little stronger than Nicole. Okay, let's just use this language a little bit. So, you know, I think we would look at it in that way. I think it is, you know, when the students have the ability to stay on at the end of the program, on the one hand, that can be a fantastic thing. On the other hand, I really just like them to come and go with the group, as you know, as much as we can. And I certainly do not think that they should be missing class at Drexel because they have added on to their program. So, you know, that's their choice. But as you know, from an academic standpoint, I think we can send that message to them, like, that's fine, you can stay late, but you need to be sure that you're not missing class at Drexel. You know, they can choose for themselves. We can't necessarily enforce that, but we can give that message. Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of complicate this scenario a little bit too.
Okay.
And it does come from a real world experience, but I'm wondering about students this is a student who has taken themselves out, I'm sick, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, and maybe we're reading that as they're being a little soft or whatever.
Right.
What about the student who is talking through something that they maybe shouldn't? In my case, it was acute appendicitis in Moscow, and really, I really would have, like, I made the situation medically much more
Dangerous.
complicated and
Yes.
dangerous by ignoring it and refusing, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the nightmare scenario, which I lived through. I could tell you the gory details, but I'm not going to do that. But I could well imagine, because I see this all the time with students, they've got some kind of infectious crud, and they are coming to class, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And can we encourage? Should we encourage? What do we do with a student who
Again,
that maybe isn't dealing?
I would use this
realistically
the on-call nurse helpline, because I will tell you, we haven't used it that much, but my sense is more often than not they're going to say go see a doctor, unless it's very clear that it's like a cold or something like that. They're going to say go see a doctor, and then you have a medical professional who's giving that guidance, and then you just say, like, this is what we're going to do. How do we do this, you know? And you kind of have to take over in that way and not really have it be about asking the student, but just like, this is what we're going to do, and let's move this along, because you know, it's really in their best interest, it's in the best interest of, you know, the overall program to get that addressed. And I think also sometimes sharing your own experiences with them in that scenario, you could tell that student, you know,
Looking back.
In another situation, this is what happened, and we have had students that have had appendicitis.
Yeah, I had to remove
programs.
the choice of going
Yeah.
somewhere better to get
Right.
medical care. I had to have my appendix out in Moscow as opposed
Right.
to like West Germany or the United States.
Yes, exactly.
Because
Well,
I-
and I
I
think,
had it done in Soviet Union, so we're good.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I was 89.
but I think you can.
I had it
Well,
done
we should
in
go.
I think you can point to the support that we have, and I think it does feel overwhelming. But remind them, hey, we have on call. They're gonna make arrangements for us at a facility that will have Western standards. If there isn't a facility like that there, they will fly them somewhere else, so that they can have the care that they need. And that's a much better route than just kind of asking at your hotel, well, what do you recommend or something. I mean, maybe your hotel would do a good recommendation, but because we have that resource,
Oh, yeah.
let's use it. We should absolutely use it. And I think, one time when I was talking with people about this, they said, well, does our premium go up every time we call on call? No, our premium does not go up every time we call on call. Please make use of on call. Every year we get a utilization report, and this past year, I had a lot of calls to on call, but I did not have a lot from faculty and staff and student travelers that, there's a lot of information that they can provide to you. And sometimes you might call and ask about something and then say, oh, I don't need it. It's much better to open a case and close a case than to wait. So, those are the kinds of things that you can do. Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna point out, for this example, if her reasoning is actually valid, she refuses to go because she doesn't wanna pay for it. So in the medical questionnaire, we do ask them whether their health insurance covers them overseas. Whether or not they actually call to verify that, we don't know. But those that have selected no, I actually reach out to them and strongly encourage them to consider purchasing supplemental insurance for that period of time. Again, we can't enforce that. And then some of them actually will respond and say, I'm taking the risk, I'm choosing not to purchase international health insurance. But could you talk about on-call's service of fronting funds for
Yes,
specific things and
so
how that
in a scenario, if a student does not have the resources to pay for a doctor, we can authorize on-call to pay on the student's behalf. We had to do this with a patient that we had that was admitted to a hospital in Vietnam for deep vein thrombosis on a flight. And the hospital was just requiring like a $5,000 upfront, this is what you've got to pay. And so we asked on-call to guarantee those funds. We did get the money back from the student eventually, which was great. But we do have that capacity. If there's an emergency situation, and even in this situation, if they're saying that, I just don't have any money and I'm going to pay for the doctor, first of all, going to see a doctor in most countries is not nearly as expensive as it is here. So that might not be such a huge expense. And I would, if it's an emergency, just do what you need to do and we'll figure out the other end of it later. But you can also reach out to us. I mean, we have paid for I have this, I call it my fictitious international health, safety, and security budget that I think I have this pot of money. Nobody's ever told me I don't. So I will go into this and I'll say, I need $500 to cover this that's related to international health, safety, and security. And it gets paid and it's all good. In the current climate, who knows if I still have that. But we have occasionally done that. Obviously, we don't want to do that all the time and we're not just throwing money at things, but in a situation where you're really concerned about the well-being of a student and it's something like this that is keeping them from going to the doctor, let's just remove that from the table so that we can get the student the care that they need and we'll worry about the other piece later. So.
And I imagine this is the conversation that you usually have during orientation period, because I didn't go through it yet, but I know some of you did. So is this the conversation that we say that, that there's a certain free service like this call possibility, so that they know upfront that if anything happens, they know that they can reach out without thinking how much it will cost them? Do we proactively do that in orientation, or we do that when things happen, like a post hoc?
Are you talking about on-call, or are you talking about international medical insurance?
I am talking about on-call, just the possibility for them to talk to a nurse
Yes.
as a capacity. Do we say this in the orientation, or do you recommend? Because I feel like if we say that and they know it's free, they're more likely to tell us what's really happening with them, rather than dealing with it later when it escalates.
Well,
Yeah, so the slide in the template doesn't have all the bulleted on-call services, but the students in their acceptance material, there's an item specifically around on-call that bullets out. Now, whether they read it or not, but you're welcome to add, so if you see that there's certain services that you in particular want to highlight about on-call, you're welcome to add to the bullet points that are in the template.
And I think the other thing too, if you haven't had your orientation with the students yet, one of the things that you can do in your orientation is ask them all to get out their smartphones and download on-call right there while you're sitting with them. And while they're doing that, that gives you the opportunity to talk about on-call and say, oh, this is a service that's provided by the university. It has it has these great benefits. It also will help in an emergency situation, but there are a lot of other benefits to having it. So, I think the other thing too, in working with students, is we're really trying to make them into smart world travelers, not just for the purpose of this particular program. Obviously, we want them to be smart, well-informed travelers for your ICAs, but also if they're doing this at 20, they're going to do it again and again and again. So what a great gift we can give them to make them into kind of smart, savvy travelers who think about these things, who are aware of the resources that are available and know how to tap into it. That's kind of the way we try to approach it, because we're never going to be able to eliminate all of the issues of the world. So we have to be sure that they're prepared for it. And I would say more often than not, our students go abroad, they have amazing experiences. Nothing really goes awry, but occasionally it will. And I think that it's also in kind of setting the expectations for students, like, sometimes things go wrong. That happens here at Drexel, that happens, when you're abroad, and we just deal with it. And, also as students are moving through these things, to remind them, like, wow, this is amazing. You're handling this exceptionally well. Or when it's all over, acknowledging, like, wow, that was super stressful, but look, you did this. So it's kind of empowering them. It's, some of the challenges I think that we have now with young people, it seems like their resiliency is not as strong as we might expect. And I think trying to kind of help them move on with that and realize, like, hey, I can handle this, is a good thing. So.
And just to add, first of all, I want to applaud your department, because you guys are very thorough, and I'll speak for myself, maybe it's transcending, but I appreciate the thoroughness, I appreciate the packets, I appreciate being spoken to like I'm 5 on some areas, because I need to know, right? Not that you did that, but I'm saying documentation-wise, right?
I aim for more at age 12, actually. But.
So that works for me. But hearing the scenarios and hearing we've done this, this is in there, we supported, we have a no, they checked yes. I mean, that is amazing. So
Thank you.
kudos to your department. And then that allows us to focus on why are we taking them? What do
Exactly.
we want them to get out of this experience? So I just applaud your
Absolutely,
department.
because
thank
having
you.
known some of this information, 2012, when I was traveling to that Turkey thing, and I had this whole ASHS thing, I would have
Right.
contacted, because I was registered through Drexel, but I didn't know that there was this service. I was like, okay, I was stranded in Germany for a week.
Well, I will say in 2012, we did not have as robust of a.
Yeah.
It's only been in the last, I would say probably last 5 years, but so when I came on at Drexel, I worked part-time on graduate student opportunities and part-time on health and safety, and it just kind of kept evolving. So I've been in this role for 3 years, a little over 3 years, and but one of the things that was easy when I got into this role was that we already had a lot of the stuff in place for education abroad. That, you know, a lot of these things were not new to the education abroad team, and so, which is good. And as you said, you know, we want to kind of remove all of the concerns about these things so you can focus on your discipline and, you know, doing the best program that you can for the students. So I applaud all of you for being willing to do this. So I think that is it for, we did skip one of the scenarios, but we're over on time, so I want to be respectful of people's time. If you have any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out to us, Haji or myself.